Okay, let's unpack this. We've brought together quite a stack of sources today. We're looking at material that really spans ancient philosophy, military history, and the incredibly detailed world of Greek and Roman law.
It really is more than just history, isn't it? It's a deep dive into power itself. We're essentially tracking a huge shift here.
Yeah.
We start with the very local, very intense idea of citizenship in the Greek city-states, and then we move towards this massive, formal, and frankly, deeply hierarchical legal system of the Roman Empire.
Right. And our mission, really, is to figure out how social status, your birth, your gender, free or enslaved, rich or poor, how that fundamentally dictated everything. Your legal rights, what taxes you paid, military duties, even how your family worked.
Yeah.
We want to see how they actually put the ideal citizen into law.
And you have to hold these two worlds sort of in contrast. The Greek polis, which, demanded incredible courage, but also allowed for a certain political chaos, versus the Roman model. Universal, bureaucratic, often quite despotic in its legal administration. We're pulling from everywhere: Thermopylae, Aristotle, Plato, right through to Justinian's Digest and Cicero.
So much material.
Yeah, and the really fascinating thing we're chasing is how completely the definition of a good citizen, someone deserving rights and protection, changed across this whole period.
Okay, let's start where that citizen concept was really forged. Greece, Athens specifically. The identity of the free male citizen seems absolutely rooted in military duty, this idea of Andrea.
Andrea, yeah. Usually translated as manliness or courage, but it was the core political virtue.
How so?
No, it wasn't abstract. It was physical commitment. You showed it on the battlefield, fighting for the community. In that very competitive, hoplite-focused culture of the polis, being a citizen meant being ready to stand in the battle line. If you didn't have courage, you really didn't have status.
And this wasn't just custom, right? It was formalized. I'm thinking of the Ephebic Oath.
Exactly. That oath is the key. It's sworn by young men entering military service, and it's all about duty.
What does it actually say?
Things like, I will not bring shame on my sacred arms, nor will I abandon the man beside me. The focus is entirely collective. Your weapons are sacred. Leaving your post betrays the guy next to you, who represents the community. Duty comes before survival.
So what happened legally if someone, failed? If they showed cowardice? Was it just bad reputation, or could you end up in court?
Oh, absolutely in court. Shame was the glue holding it together. If a hoplite was clearly cowardly, dodged the draft, ran away astratia or lepitaction, they called the charges he faced, public humiliation, ridicule, and yes, formal prosecution.
Penalty.
Loss of status, often, atimia, loss in political rights. The community could essentially kick you out.
So the law wasn't really about rewarding heroes, but more about punishing the ones who fell below a minimum standard.
That's basically it. Minor slip-ups or just not being particularly brave probably didn't risk much. But showing outright cowardice, that was legally dangerous.
It policed the appearance of shame.
Precisely. The threat of legal punishment for cowardice combined with social ostracization was probably a bigger driver than hoping for a medal. Shame and honor were the real forces here, often more powerful than the written laws.
Okay, let's move from the battlefield to conflict within the community. There's this huge shift, isn't there, from blood feuds to state-run justice. Aeschylus's Oresteia seems key here.
The Oresteia is the Athenian story about this transition. You have this ancient cycle of revenge, kill for kill, the private logic of the family, the oikos, and the plays bring it to a halt by setting up a law court in Athens.
So the state takes over vengeance.
Right. The resolution isn't just Orestes getting off, it's the Furies, these ancient vengeance spirits, being persuaded to accept a new public role. They become guardians of the city's order, the polis. It's a powerful symbol of shifting conflict resolution from the family to the state.
That sounds very neat, very ideal. But the sources suggest Athenian courts weren't always about pure, impartial justice stucca. Was litigation often just viewed by other means?
I think that's fair to say, yeah. It was intensely adversarial. You needed skilled speakers, rhetoricians. People definitely used the courts as another way to carry on old fights.
So not always about truth, maybe more about winning.
The ideal was equality, impartiality, deco. The reality, often political maneuvering, personal grudges. The best speaker or the guy with the best connections might win, not necessarily the one who was right. Justice and political reality were often in tension.
Which makes that concept of hubris really important in their law. We think of it as just arrogance, but it was more specific legally, wasn't it?
Much more specific. Hubris wasn't just pride. Legally, it was the crime of deliberately dishonoring or degrading another free person, disrupting the social order. It was an attack on someone's public standing.
What kind of acts counted?
Most clearly, two things. Physical assault on a free person, especially if done contemptuously, and crucially, sexual violence or violations of sexual honor. These things struck at the heart of the social hierarchy the polis depended on.
Okay, that hierarchy obviously excluded large groups. Let's talk about women's status. They weren't legal persons themselves, right? Controlled by male guardians.
Correct. They lived under Kyria guardianship by a father, husband, brother. Legally, they were incompetent at kairos. They couldn't act publicly in their own right.
So how did society control their behavior, ensure they fit the mold?
Gossip. It sounds trivial, maybe, but it was a powerful mechanism.
Gossip as law enforcement.
In a way, yeah. Social engineering. Gossip dragged private details about women's conduct out into the open. If a woman broke the rules, seen out too much, involved in scandal, the community would react. Hostility, ridicule.
And that reflected badly on her.
Her male guardian, her kyrios. The shame wasn't just hers, it stained his honor in the community in politics.
So he had a strong incentive to keep her in line to protect his own standing.
Exactly, which helps explain that rather chilling ideal you hear from Athenian men. The less said about them women, the better. It shows a real preference for keeping women confined, out of the public eye. Even Aristotle, who talked about a political relationship between husband and wife.
Implying some shared authority.
Within the household, yes, managing the home. But legally, publicly, she remained dependent, no role in the assembly or the courts.
Right. Okay, let's pivot now. From Athens, with its focus on community shame and participation, to Rome, a very different beast. Here, power seems incredibly concentrated within the family, under the paterfamilias.
Yeah, and that brings us straight to patria potestas, paternal authority. It's genuinely one of the strangest problems in legal history, as one scholar put it. Just the sheer severity of it and how long it lasted deep into the empire.
How severe are we talking? This jus vitae nisisk, power of life and death. Seriously.
Originally, yes. It seems the patria potestas was almost absolute. Life and death power, uncontrolled physical punishment. The father could arrange marriages, adopt children out, even under early law like the 12 Tables, sell his children.
Sell them?
Yeah, though there were limits, selling a son 3 times actually freed him from the father's power. But legally, anyone under his potestas, even an adult son who was a famous general, was treated like a legal minor.
That's staggering. But did fathers actually, execute their adult sons in, say, Cicero's time? Were there social limits?
Ah, that's the crucial point. The raw legal right existed for ages, but the moral and practical exercise of it eroded much earlier. By the late Republic, executing a child certainly required consulting family councils, maybe magistrates. It became qualified.
And other powers faded, too.
Definitely. By the late Empire, selling children was basically abolished, though poverty still forced it sometimes. Dictating marriage became more like a veto right, conditional, but...
But the core structure remained.
Yes. The fundamental power structure, the father as the head, persisted. That made the Roman familia very different from the Greek oikos. The Roman family head retained this almost sovereign authority. Property, too. Anything a son or even a slave earned legally belonged to the paterfamilias.
Keeping all the financial and thus political weight with him.
Exactly, regardless of how old or successful his children were.
And this power structure is completely tied up with inheritance, isn't it? This idea of universal succession.
Absolutely central to Roman inheritance law. The core idea is a man lives on in his heir. It's framed as an elimination of the fact of death. The heir steps into the deceased's shoes completely.
Not just assets, but everything.
Everything. Rights, duties, religious obligations, and crucially, debts, liabilities. It's about continuity of the legal persona, not just handing out the goods.
Which loops back to the father's power regarding debt.
Precisely. Since someone under potestas couldn't legally own property, they couldn't accept an inheritance with its debts against the father's will. If a relative died leaving debts, the heir took it all assets and liabilities. Unless you were an outsider heir, an extraneous heirs who could refuse. But for kids under power, the debt instantly became the father's problem, reinforcing his control over the family's finances.
Okay, let's look at business. Contracts. Roman law starts very formal, ritualistic, but it evolves, right, towards something more flexible.
A huge evolution, yeah. Early Roman contracts, like the stipulatio, were all about form. You had to say the exact words, perform the right actions. The ritual was the contract.
But that must have been cumbersome for trade.
Extremely. So Roman jurists, pushed by the needs of a growing, complex economy, developed what we call consensual contracts. Sale, lease, partnership, mandate, these were the big ones.
And the key difference was?
The focus shifted. In the mature form, it wasn't about the ritual anymore. It was about the mental agreement, the genuine intention of the parties, the vinculum juris, the legal bond.
The meeting of minds.
Exactly. That psychological agreement became primary. It's a massive development, foundational for Western contract law. Commerce needed that flexibility.
Okay, let's talk about another status group. Slaves. Roman slavery was enormous, vital to the economy. But the sources mention something distinct about freeing slaves. Manumission.
Yeah, while Roman slavery could be incredibly brutal, the process for freeing slaves, manumissio, was remarkably well developed and had significant consequences. Roman slavery, maybe unlike some other systems, allowed for freed slaves to be assimilated pretty fully into society.
As citizens.
Yes, often on terms surprisingly close to native-born citizens.
Close, but not identical.
Correct. A freedman, a libertus, gained citizenship but still owed certain duties to his former master, who became his patronus. This involved respect, sometimes services, but crucially, his children were born free, full citizens with no strings attached.
So upward mobility was possible across generations.
Absolutely. That potential for integration was quite unique and helped Rome absorb conquered peoples and maintain its workforce. You get figures like Trimalchio in Petronius, okay, he's a caricature, but he represents that potential for freedmen to gain immense wealth, even if it was seen as vulgar.
How did thinkers at the time grapple with the morality or immorality of slavery? The Stoics had a particular view.
The Stoics offered a kind of internal defense. They argued that legal slavery, the condition of your body, was external, indifferent, like wealth or poverty. It didn't affect your inner self, your soul.
So true slavery was internal.
Yes. True slavery for a Stoic was being enslaved to your own passions, emotions, desires. A wise person could be physically chained but remain internally free. An emperor ruled by anger or fear was the real slave.
That's a very philosophical take. How did the later Christian view differ?
The Christian perspective shifted the blame, you could say. It wasn't about nature or Stoic indifference. Drawing on Genesis and the fall of man, Christian thinkers argued slavery wasn't natural, but a consequence of sin.
Divine punishment.
Essentially, yes. A result of humanity's fall from grace. A necessary evil in a broken world. Part of the divine judgment on sinfulness. So not inherent, but a consequence of a moral failing of humankind.
Right. Okay, so as the empire expands, these legal complexities just multiply. We move past the Greek citizen-soldier ideal and the Roman father figure toward something else. Explicitly different laws for different ranks.
This is really the hallmark of imperial Roman law, differential justice. You see the sharp divide emerge.
Yeah.
The honorable ones versus the lower ones, who fell into each camp.
Honesty were the elite. Senators, equestrians, wealthy town councilors, military veterans, humiliors were basically everyone else. The common plebs, peasants, urban poor.
And the law treated them differently. How? Just lighter sentences.
Both lighter sentences and different procedures. Honesty were generally exempt from torture, except maybe for treason. If they faced the death penalty, it was usually beheading seen as quicker, more honorable.
And the humilior, much harsher penalties for the same crimes. Crucifixion, being burned alive, thrown to wild beasts in the arena. We even hear of Emperor Marcus Aurelius personally trying capital cases involving homines honestae, perhaps showing more leniency.
While the common folk were stuck with the regular courts.
Exactly. It shows these two distinct tracks. The elite got access to the emperor or high officials acting for him a more personalized, maybe favorable justice. The average person faced the rougher, less predictable local courts or governor's judgments. Justice itself became a status symbol.
And this imperial authority permeated the whole system, even appeals.
Yes. High officials like the Praetorian prefects, the Praefecti Praetorio, judged vice sacra literally in place of the sacred emperor.
Their word was final.
Pretty much. Constantine explicitly forbade appeals from their decisions in 331 CE, the stated reason, to prevent the emperor's own sacred authority from being diminished by questioning his representative. Questioning the prefect was almost like questioning the emperor himself.
That tight link between status and imperial power seems mirrored in how the military operated too, not just on the frontiers, but everywhere.
That's a key point. We picture legions in border forts, but soldiers were woven into the fabric of cities across the empire. You had stationary soldiers on police duty and frumentari, originally grain supply officers who later became intelligence agents, maybe even secret police.
Stationed where?
Scattered right through cities like Carthage or Dora Europos, not just guards, but doing clerical work, administration. They were deeply embedded.
What was the effect on local life?
Constant interaction, constant reminder of imperial power. These soldiers had police authority, often without much oversight. Archaeological finds, like at Dora Europos, show military guys living right among civilians, marrying locals. It created this complex social mix where military rank gave you immediate local clout.
And sometimes military status could even override traditional social hierarchies.
Absolutely. Imperial needs could trump class. Look at Egypt. Senators weren't allowed there for security reasons.
Right, the breadbasket. Too important.
Exactly. So the top military and administrative jobs often went to equestrians. An equestrian tribunus militum might command a legion there, a job usually reserved for a senator elsewhere. Status was fluid, shaped by imperial strategy.
Okay, now let's get to maybe the most corrosive aspect of high status in the later empire.
Yeah.
The financial burden, taxes, liturgies. The state's relationship with the wealthy changed drastically.
Yeah, this was a shift of fatal importance, as historians call it. Early on, Rome was sometimes praised, like in Sicily, for taking only military help from subjects, not cash. A wise and magnanimous principle.
Wise loyalty.
Foster loyalty, yeah. Kept the focus on military service, maintained a healthier social contract, but that principle got abandoned. Mandatory cash payments took over, leading to compulsory public duties monera.
And this is where being rich became a problem.
A huge liability. Starting seriously under emperors like Vespasian and Hadrian, the state basically forced wealthy locals to take on public burdens. Collecting taxes, especially indirect ones, became a liturgy, a munus.
How did that work?
Rich municipal figures were appointed as conductors, tax farmers. They were made personally responsible for collecting the full amount of tax assessed on their area.
Even if they couldn't actually collect it? Famine. People fled.
Exactly. If there was a shortfall, the conductor had to make it up from his own pocket. Your wealth essentially became collateral for the state's revenue.
That's brutal. It turns wealth into a kind of public debt.
It was. Often not profitable, sometimes ruinous for the local elites. They became unpaid, high-risk state agents. The state guaranteed its income by pushing all the risk onto its wealthiest provincial subjects. It's a model seen earlier in Hellenistic kingdoms like the Ptolemies in Egypt.
And this must have destroyed the relationship between the local elites and the central government.
It certainly didn't help. It fundamentally changed that bond. We see a similar sensitivity, though maybe for different reasons, back in Athens too with their liturgies.
Like funding a warship.
Yeah, the triarchy, or paying special war taxes, the aisphora. For wealthy Athenians, this wasn't a one-off. It was a constant financial pressure throughout their lives, alongside potential military service. It caused endless lawsuits and friction.
Finally, status was always a weapon in politics. In Rome, accusations of immorality, especially sexual scandals, seem really common.
Very common. Cicero, Pompey, Augustus, they all accused rivals of seducing other elite men's wives. Superficially, it's a moral attack.
But there was more to it.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't just about private morality. It was an attack on the rival's familia, the core unit of Roman order.
So, if you could mess with someone's family,
it signaled you were powerful enough to disrupt the most fundamental part of an elite Roman's life, his household, his honor. It showed your political potency, your willingness to break the rules. Attacking the home implied a readiness to challenge the state itself. The accuser could pose as a defender of order, even while playing dirty politics.
Wow. Okay, so pulling all this together after this deep dive, it seems ancient society wasn't just run by laws on paper, but by these deeply embedded, constantly shifting ideas of status.
Absolutely. We've gone from the Greek ideal of the brave citizen defending the polis through the almost bizarre power of the Roman father, right up to the empire where your legal rights literally depended on whether you were honesty or humiliores. Every right, every duty stemmed from where you stood in that hierarchy.
And the final point, the really critical one maybe, is how the Roman state ended up relying on wealth, on fiscal extraction, over older ideas of civic duty.
That's the endgame, it seems. Rome's decision to force its rich citizens into becoming involuntary financiers for the empire, turning private wealth into a public liability through these liturgies, tells us something profound about how large empires function, or maybe fail.
The stability shifts from military loyalty to the tax ledger.
Precisely. It rested less on the citizen soldier and more on the central state's ability to squeeze revenue out of its subjects, especially the rich ones.
So where does that leave us? What's the takeaway thought here? Think about Rome abandoning that early idea of not demanding cash tribute, choosing money over military fidelity. What happens long-term when being a Roman citizen becomes less about fighting for Rome and more about being liable to the taxman?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a huge, sprawling empire with massive financial needs, does power always, inevitably, drift towards the money? Does the need for revenue inevitably undermine older, perhaps more robust ideas of citizenship based on service and shared risk? It suggests that when the structures of status get twisted by overwhelming financial pressure, they can become the empire's own undoing, alienating the very people who should be its strongest supporters.